Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and I know that you guys have been waiting for a new tier list to see where all of the symbiotes land and whether they're good or not to invest in. And I know that a lot of you are still waiting with bated breath, hoping that your boy, our boy, Cassidy, gets a rework, gets a tier 3, gets a uniform. You know, I'm still waiting on that, and that's sort of why, in the back of my head psychologically, I was waiting. I was like, I'll do the tier list, right? I'll use Carnage, and I'll be able to see how good he is, and then I'll make the tier list. But man, I don't know when we're gonna get that sneak peek, if we're ever gonna get that sneak peek. And we know Silk is gonna get an awakening, but let's be honest, Silk's value is not gonna really go much further than it's gone and than it is. So I decided that I would put together a new tier list for you. But if you've been to the tier list guide lately or in the last couple hours, you know that it hasn't been changed. So what kind of tier list am I making for you guys today? Well, we're gonna do something a little bit different. Because of the boycott, I know you guys are not spending your real dollars, real cash money. Some of you guys are going even further with the boycott and you're not spending crystals, which is pretty impressive. I do not have that much willpower, but I do shout out to you if you do. But we can do a no CTP tier list. Yeah, we're gonna stick it. We're gonna stick it to Marvel Future Fight. We're gonna stick it to the devs. And I'm going to give you guys all of the best tips that I have for the best characters that you can invest in if you don't have CTPs. Now, there are a bunch of different ways. There's about 15 or so ways that you can actually get a CTP. So there's about 15 free CTPs, free in the sense that you don't have to spend real money. You either have to invest time and crystals, but not actually spending real money. But that's only 15 CTPs. And yes, we do get a free CTP every month or so. It's actually a little bit less. It's actually a little bit more than a month. It's about, whatever, 35, 40 days. But you still don't have a lot of CTPs. And even if you have CTPs, maybe you've already equipped them. And of course, the 600 crystals to unequip, which is BS, baloney, shouldn't exist, makes it so that you can equip CTPs in the characters that you want. So you're looking to invest. You've got your resources. You've stocked them up, right? And you're like, okay, who should I invest in without my CTP? You know, what kind of obelisk can I roll? How lucky do I need to be on the obelisk roll? So those are all of the answers that I've taken into consideration when constructing this list. I'm not just looking at the characters that are best without a CTP. Sorry, not best without a CTP, but that can be very, very good without a CTP. Every character is best with the CTP. We know that already because the CTP just offers additional bonus stats and abilities that regular obelisks don't have. There's no character in this game, unfortunately, that will be better with an obelisk than a CTP. It just does not exist, period. So if you want the absolute most out of any character from Xylophone to Arachnite, you have to give them a CTP if you want to get the absolute most out of the character, if you want them to be their absolute best. However, there's a big difference in what some of these characters can do with a CTP versus with an obelisk. So if you take two characters that are tier 3 that cost 800 CCF, like Venom and Crescent, you actually can't even see Crescent on this page, but just take my word for it. Even let's say Crescent and Moon Knight, or sorry, Crescent and Venom. They're both 800 CCF tier 3s. Venom with an obelisk, very, very good. Crescent with an obelisk, very, very bad. Hard to play, annoying, not as good. So this is really what we're looking for. We're not just looking for characters that can make it work with an obelisk, but we're also taking a look at, if you are going to roll an obelisk, how good does the obelisk need to be? So for example, Enchantress or Jean Grey, they have some pretty good damage with their regular skills. They can make it work with an obelisk. They need mind damage, let's say, for example. On the flip side, if you take a look at another character like Luna Snow, not only does she need cold damage, but she's also going to need crit damage or crit rate because she doesn't have any self buffs, whereas characters like Enchantress and Jean Grey, they do have self buffs to sustain them. They don't need to find those stats on an obelisk the way that Luna Snow does. So that is also taken into consideration. Another example would be a character that doesn't have a uniform like Viper. She needs poison damage on an obelisk, and then she's also going to need additional stats because she can't rely on getting those crit damage, crit rate stats, or those other stats, ignore defense, etc., from her uniform because she doesn't have one. So she's going to need that in an obelisk, which then makes the obelisk RNG that you need go up. And the harder the obelisk is to roll, the less accessible it is. So that's basically how the tier list is shaped out. Free-to-play gods sound exactly the way that they should. These characters can be very, very good, i.e. one-shotting. In the case of Moon Knight, you can one-shot stage 50 Thanos. If you want to check that out on Moonbro's channel, that's pretty damn good. Now, is the character free-to-play friendly? Not necessarily because of Morbius, but if you have him, actually, I think he was untranscended. So I think it is free-to-play friendly, but you sort of see what I'm saying. You don't need a CTP at all. and he can do amazing things. We showcased Venom yesterday, and we'll do more showcases on him, but he can do stage 1 null, he can do stage 70, 80 Proxima. He's doing amazing things with an Obelisk, and the Obelisk doesn't even need to be rolled that well, right? You're looking at one stat and a proc. That's it. You're not looking at some amazing, crazy, outstanding rolls. You don't need a perfect Obelisk to make things work. Holiday Lady Deadpool is a tricky one, and I'm going to bold this one because if you don't have the Holiday Lady Deadpool uniform, then Deadpool basically disappears. He doesn't quite disappear, but he goes down several rows. He probably goes down to like needs good RNG, or maybe needs godly, probably needs good RNG. So he drops 2 stages or more, and his overall value drops tremendously. So just keep that in mind. This uniform is a huge game changer for Deadpool. Blackwood is another really good character without a CTP. She can do very, very well in both PvE and PvP. You've got, of course, Sharon Rogers. You've got your Beta Ray Bill. And again, Beta Ray Bill, you just need to roll a lightning damage proc. Now, if you get a better lightning damage proc, can he go higher? Sure. But can he one-shot high stages with just a lightning damage proc? Absolutely. And so that's how it goes for these free-to-play gods here. Moving to the right side, you basically just have characters that progressively get not necessarily worse, but they require more specific obelisks, and their value does drop a little bit if you don't have that specific obelisk. So it's not saying that, holidays, for example, we're not saying that someone like Medusa is just better than every other universal type here. It's just that with an obelisk, she can outperform most of these characters consistently, right? I'm not saying that Black Widow is better than Luna Snow overall or for PvE content, but Luna Snow, if she doesn't have a CTP of Rage or a CTP of Judgment, she's really annoying to play. That's why she's over here. And on top of being really annoying to play, you're going to need, like I said, a double cold damage proc, or you're going to need a cold damage crit damage proc. So that is why she's over here. This doesn't mean the character's worse. It just means that you need much better RNG for the obelisk. If you scroll to the right, you'll see that we have a couple more zones here. We have, of course, the needs rework, which are just characters that are just bad. You have the mostly support. These are characters where if you're not going to give them a CTP or a CTP of Insight, you're probably not going to be spending a lot of time rolling an obelisk for them, right? For Nick Fury, White Fox, Wave, Colossus, Red She-Hulk, you're probably just going to slap some max HP invincibility and just kind of let them go, or they're just not going to perform very well without a CTP, and they're just going to do their one job, which is to support. CTP wasted sort of goes without saying. You could give these characters a CTP, but it might just be a massive waste of the CTP because they're just going to perform worse than anyone to the right or to the left would with that same CTP. Here, CTP needed is, again, very clearly just they need a CTP. I'm not saying that these characters are bad. I'm not saying that Cyclops is better than Doctor Strange, by no means, but Doctor Strange needs a CTP. Without a CTP, he's going to struggle a lot in PvE content at high stages, and then for PvP, it's going to be tough for him as well. So he basically needs a CTP to realize the majority of his potential, and that's how it goes for these characters. I did put a little gray bar here, and then I added more because these characters are in the same category, but they're just substantially worse. So I just wanted to sort of separate these top-end characters who are almost all of them are Awakened or Tier 3, with the exception of Dr. Voodoo and Ghost Rider Punisher. I wanted to make an exception, or I wanted to make a sort of differentiation between these characters and then characters like Gorilla Man, Moon Girl, Bishop. I mean, Bishop, you can give him a CTP of regen. He's not bad, but is Doctor Strange going to be way better for PvP with a regen or Red Skull? Yes, they are. So I wanted to make that distinction there. So yeah, needs godly RNG. This can be two things. This can be either they need really good rolls on the stats, or you need to get really lucky with their rotation. So I'll give you an example of a character like Luna Snow. Actually, not Luna Snow. I'll give you an example, like a character like Professor X. So Professor X, you actually do need really good RNG with the obelisk you roll, because he needs mind damage, and he's probably going to need crit damage or crit rate because he doesn't have any self buffs. So not having any self buffs means that his stats are going to be really low if your obelisk only has mind damage and a damage proc. On top of that, because of the way his skills work and because of the fact that you cancel a lot of the skills, he just doesn't work well with a proc. Your best bet is probably to do 3, cancel 5. Or, maybe cancel 3 a little bit faster when you see the buffs pop up into 5. But he's really tough to play without a CTP of Judgment or a CTP of Rage because you do so much spamming. You can see 1, 2, and 3 have really short, well, you actually can't see here, but 1, 2, and 3 have pretty short cooldowns, But then 5 and 4 have much longer cooldowns. You can see here 20 seconds. You can't actually see that there, but it says 20 seconds. And then this one is 18. And then you drop to 15, 8, and 7. So he's really tough to play. And you need very specific stats on his obelisk to make him work. So that's why you need godly RNG. Another character like Dr. Octopus, you don't necessarily need as good RNG because his rotation is a little bit simpler for actually playing him. But again, like these other characters, he does not have buffs. He does not have self buffs. He's got a couple here, but they're not really going to help you, like crit damage and things like that. So because of that, he may have it on his uniform. No, he doesn't. So he has no crit damage, no crit rate buffs. So that's going to make it much harder to play him and max out his stats than it would if you had given him something. So you could roll like a baby CTP of energy with ignore, dodge, crit damage, and a proc, but then you need 3 perfect stats. So for that reason, he's going to need godly RNG. An example of someone who doesn't need godly RNG, again, he's kind of awkward to play, right? But if we take a look at Amadeus Cho, who I actually put all the way over here because he's very, very good with an obelisk, and there's extensive testing of how good he is, he has great self buffs. So he's got a buff here, which doesn't give him those substats, but does give him attack. And then he's got the accumulation here. But then on his passive, he's going to give himself guaranteed crit rate, which is going to help a lot. And then here on Will of Aims, he gives himself crit damage. So he's giving himself both crit damage and guaranteed crit rate, which is really, really good. And then he can even increase his crit damage more. So he gets a lot of those extra stats, those additional stats that help you sort of fill out the character's details page without having to worry about that. So that is sort of the differentiation between, that's sort of the difference between needs godly RNG and needs good RNG. Good RNG, I see it as you're going to need an obelisk with 2 perfect stats. So 2 perfect stats would be, let's say for Apocalypse, mind damage and a proc. But Apocalypse has good self buffs, so he's not going to need other things. You know, Hulk is going to need max HP and a proc, or guard break immunity and max HP. Honestly, Hulk might be in the needs godly RNG, but you sort of see what I'm saying. Some of these characters are going to need a lot more, or if they don't need a lot more on the obelisk itself, let's say Molten Man just needs, maybe not Molten Man, but let's say Red Hulk just needs fire damage and a proc, but his rotation is going to be a lot harder. Or someone like Swordmaster or Warpath, their rotation is going to be a lot harder with a regular damage proc obelisk versus a rage or something else that can sort of cover up for their mistakes and sort of the timing of the skills. So that's basically how it boils down. Jean Grey, I'll give you guys a few more specific examples of characters that I bolded. Jean Grey, I put her a little bit higher. She's worse than these other characters for PvE, but she's very good for PvP. Even with an obelisk in PvP, she is a monster. So you could give her just a guard break immunity, damage proc obelisk. It's very simple to roll. It shouldn't take you more than 10-15 tries, and she can dominate. So for that reason, she's got to be up here because it's so rare to find a character that's that good for PvP with that little amount of obelisk investment. Usually for PvP, you actually have to invest more into your obelisk because the self buffs don't matter as much, right? Like giving yourself crit damage, giving yourself crit rate in PvP is not that important. But you absolutely need, right? Like it's 100%, you need guard break immunity for PvP, and then you're going to need either a damage proc or invincibility. So every character, regardless of whether they have self buffs or not, for PvP, they automatically need to have an obelisk with 2 of the stats perfect. And then the third one usually ends up having to be recovery rate, max HP, ignore dodge, or dodge. So most of the time you're actually rolling PvP obelisks looking for perfect stats. Right? You're looking for perfect stats from the get-go for PvP. Whereas with PvE, if you get something that has, like, you don't need guard break immunity. So if you get something that has crit damage and a damage proc, you're all set, right? You're all set already. You just need those 2 stats. So because of that, like, see, like this one, for example, all 3 of these stats are very crucial for, well, not crit damage as much, but the invincibility and the immunity are 100% crucial for PvP. Whereas, like, I can make this work for PvE, but this wouldn't work at all for PvP. So that's why I put Jean Grey a little bit higher. That's why I put some of these other characters like Black Widow and Yelena a little bit higher, because even with just an obelisk, they can do a lot of work in PvP. So that's basically how the tier list breaks down into, you know, the characters that are just amazing, even with an obelisk, characters that can work with an obelisk, that you're going to need some good obelisk and gameplay based RNG, so, you know, in terms of like your timing and your skill rotations, then characters that are going to need a ton of RNG for both the obelisk and the playstyle, and then characters that just it's really non-negotiable. You need a CTP for them. And then the sad list of characters here. But this list is getting smaller by the update, which is good. Characters who just probably should not have a CTP at all because they're either just a support, a la Wave, Shuri, etc., or they just don't do enough with the CTP to make it worthwhile. So hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of this list. Hopefully this has helped you and guided your next few investments in characters and uniforms and tier 3s and the awakenings and things like that in the case of you not having CTPs to spare. Hopefully we'll get a lot more CTPs. They'll just start giving us CTPs like every day. And then we won't have this problem. But until then, I'll keep making these tier lists to help you guys out. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for supporting the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.